I want to talk quickly about what we want to accomplish in this webinar. Our agenda is to take a look at the dBASE Plus development environment, which includes toolbars, menu bars, wizards, and other visual design tools that relate to specific dBASE Plus components, and how and when these tools can be used. I will be showing you how to use these tools to create and edit BDE aliases. This allows you to set up a link to a group of tables, which also defines your database location. Tables with indexes using the Table Designer. SQL files using dBASE tables with complex SQL statements. Data modules using dQuery for creating parent-child relationships and as a visual tool to do quick filters and reports. Forms for data entry, and customized menus for your form. I also want to do customized reports showing you how to group and summarize the data. The first thing we need to be looking at during the demonstration is the Start menu shortcuts included when you install dBASE Plus 2.8. Specifically, we want to look at the documentation available in PDF form, CHN help files that will be available for contextual help as well as a direct link, a shortcut to the BDE administrator, and of course the dBASE Plus executable shortcut. Next, we're going to take a look at the design environment, or the IDE of dBASE Plus. Some of the things we'll be looking at are the menu bar and toolbar and how they relate to different designers, the Navigator, which is an all-around tool for viewing, starting, and editing just about any dBASE object or program, the command window, which can be used to directly execute one-line DBL commands in the upper pane, and as well you can view the results of your commands here in the bottom pane. Some other design tools that are used mostly for forms, reports, and other dBASE objects are the inspector. This can be used to edit just about any dBASE component's properties, events, and methods. The component palette, which categorizes and organizes visual and non-visual objects that can be dragged to add components to your forms or reports. And the field palette. This can be used to drag individual data-linked fields to your form or report designers. Now that I've given you a quick look at some of the design tools, I'd like to give you a rundown of what kind of application we're going to be creating in the demonstration. Now let's take the scenario where I plan on developing several applications. They could be employee management, sales, purchasing, etc. But I know that no matter what project I'm working on, I'll want to first create an in-house bug or wish list application that keeps track of any issues or other added functionality requested by the customer. So the first thing I'm going to need is a list of the people who may be working on a project. Now you may be the only developer, but in some cases there may be more than one person working on the application. So I want to create a table that simply has a list of the engineers that are available. Next, I'll need a list of the issues, who they're assigned to, what status they're in, and any samples or notes on how to show the issue. So I want to create a table that is used for the QAID, or Quality Assurance Identification List. Next, I'll need to create a form for data entry. It'll have its own menu that I'll design from scratch. After that, I have to consider what additional queries that I want to perform on the data. I've decided that I will need to create at least one query which includes just the open issues in the QAID list. And lastly, I also decided I want to create reports that are grouped by engineer that it was assigned to. And now let's get on to the demonstration. Now the first thing I want to do is I just want to show you quickly the shortcuts menu. We go down here to Start and then All Programs, and we will go to dBASE Plus, and whoops, wrong one, dBASE Plus, and here are our shortcut links. Basically, it's all help, documentation, application files, and it's a good idea to take the time to go to each link and get familiar with what information you can find in all of the resources available. But I just want to show you a couple of specific links that I find particularly useful. First would be the dBASE language reference. This is basically a dictionary of all the properties, events, and methods or functions of the various dBASE objects, classes, and components. These are mostly categorized in sections by component or object type. So let's take a look at the form class. Go under Form Objects, and we'll go down here to the form class. First, you'll see a quick description of the syntax to use when you're coding a form, and then of course it gives you a list of all the properties, the events, and the methods of the form class. Now let's give a quick description of what a property, event, or method is. For a property, I like to think of it as information that you're setting or getting. For example, if we look down here, we'll see the background setting. You can use the form's background setting to add an image to the background of your form. An example of a setting that we can check for is HWin client. You can use this to get the Windows handle for the form's client area. And in the events, I like to think of the events basically as something that you are detecting, and in some cases deciding whether or not that event can take place. For example, the can close event at the top. If the user is entering data in a form and hasn't finished but is interrupted and tries to close the form, you can write a chunk of code that checks to see if the data is in edit mode or if it's been saved or if it's simply in browse mode. If there is any unfinished data entry, you can decide to put up a message asking if that user would like to save or abandon the data for the current row set. And after one of these choices has been made, we can decide to let the form close using that can close event. So if we go down here to the methods, something that you want to do, it's basically some action that you want to perform. This can also be linked to an event. In other words, I only want to do this when some action or event has taken place. An example of this would be the abandon record method. Let's take the scenario from before where we use the can close event to decide if the form can be closed. Within the function for that can close event, we can, based on the answer the user gave us, either abandon the record or save the record, and then allow the closing of the form to take place. So that's pretty much it for the language reference. The other thing I want to show you is to go down here, and we will go to the dBASE Plus User's Guide. I find this pretty useful for getting started with an application. The language reference is good for how to do something, but what about when to do something, or how do I begin to create an application? So at the very top here in the user's guide, we can take a look at something I want to show you specifically. As you're upgrading your versions of dBASE Plus, if you go under Introduction and Changes from Earlier Versions, you'll see here where you can see an overview of any of the added functionality or any bug fixes that we have in that current version. So that's a pretty useful bit of information whenever you upgrade to see what else is in there. After that, basically it gives you information on installing, an introduction to the programming language, but the meat of it really starts here with Chapter 4 in creating an application, accessing and linking tables, using the source editor, all the way on down to creating an application and using your web server-side components. So that's it for the language reference. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go right into dBASE. So we'll go to Start, All Programs, dBASE Plus, and go right into the IDE. Now I'm going to show you first of all at the very top some options in the menu. If we go up here to File and Edit, they're pretty much the same basic File and Edit menu options you'll see in any program. But under File, I want to show you one specifically here. Database administration. For the database administration dialog, this is used basically to put security restrictions on your database tables. It's a little more advanced than what we're going to get into here, but it's important to know, and hopefully we'll be doing either YouTube videos or another webinar strictly regarding table security. Another thing I want to show you quickly is under View. If you happen to lose your Navigator or your command window, that'll happen sometimes, you're not sure how to get it back, that's just under the View option, and you can just pop it back up there. The next thing I want to show you is under Properties. I want to go to Desktop Properties. Now this is basically the global settings for all of the dBASE Plus IDE settings. It's also those settings that you'll find in your plus.ini file. So I'll go through each tab and just highlight a few interesting things that I find pretty useful. First, under Country, there's numeric settings, currency, date settings, language settings for the IDE. Under Table, you have some basic table settings, data entry, and under Files, I want to show you this neat little thing here. Let's say that I don't want to use the default source editor that comes with dBASE. What I want to do is I want to click on the wrench, and I like to use Notepad++ a lot. I think it's a pretty useful tool. So we'll go here and we'll go down to here and Notepad++. And edit. So we'll click Apply and OK. So if I go in and I start a new program quickly, I'll notice that it goes right into Notepad++. So I can use any editor I want if I don't want to use the default source editor in dBASE. So I'm going to go ahead back here and change it back. To do that, just got to delete it. Okay, under Application, another thing I want to show you here is under Prompt for Wizards. Now, whenever you start a new form, report, or table, whatever, usually it prompts you to ask you if you want to use the wizard or go right into the designer. But if you don't like that after a while, let's say you're just used to the designer and you could care less about the wizard. Well, if we undo that checkbox, we'll click Apply, click OK. And then if I go into the table, instead of like in the report, if I start, it'll ask wizard or designer. Usually the table will do the same, but since we turned it off, we'll just go right into the designer. Okay, so go back here and put that back on. Under the programming, basically there's just settings for the command output, programming development. One kind of interesting thing here is this error handling area. Now, while you're creating your application and while you're testing it, or even if you deploy it and give it to your customer, you have options to show what's going to happen if an error comes up, which invariably, as we all know, that's going to happen. So your options are just to quit the program. If you're creating a web application, you can send HTML error and quit. You can log your error and quit, or you can log your error and show the dialog. Lots of things you can do, but we're just going to leave it at the default. And the last thing I want to show you under desktop properties is the source aliases. These are basically just names or aliases for certain directories. All they do is point to a directory. So if I want to go down here and I want to see where the samples alias is pointing, I can get the path value down here. And if I want to see what files are in there, I can copy that path, go into Windows Explorer, paste that path, and I can see any of the files that I have underneath my samples directory. Okay, so we'll get out of there, and the next thing I want to show you is I want to show you some stuff in the Navigator. We can start just about any wizard or designer from the Navigator. It's also used to view or access any of the files that we've already created. So if you go under Forms, I'll show you, you can do a new form, and I'm just right-clicking here. You can do a new custom form. Basically, a custom form is a template for a form that can be used to save your customized settings. Say if you want to add an image as the background, you want to edit some of the defaults for the text, you want to set the form size, and on and on and on. You can use that custom form so that every time you start a new form, it already has your customized default values ready to go. Another thing you can do here is you can start a new menu and start to design a new pop-up menu. Under the reports, we can do a new report. We can do a new custom report, just like the custom form. And another thing we can do are labels. Now the labels for the reports, the label report wizard can be used to create a label such as address labels. Using predefined label structures, you can create address labels, any kind of predefined label list. Most of the standard ones we have in there. We won't be getting into that in this presentation, but hopefully in the future we can get into designing label reports. Programs, it's just simply starting a PRG file. Under tables, the one thing I really want to show you here is using the look-in drop-down at the top of the Navigator. When you are on the Tables tab, you'll notice some additions to the list. So when you click on the drop-down, you'll notice that aside from just the standard list of directories, there are also these database references. So if you want to see what's in the samples database, the dBASE samples database, you just click on that and you can see any of the tables that we have in our samples database. And if you go over to these other tabs, you'll notice that the current directory hasn't changed, just the reference to what database we're looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back. Okay, now under SQL, you can start to create your, run the SQL Designer. Under data modules, you can create a new data module. There's also a new custom data module, just like the former report. You can see what images you have. And under other, I want to show you something here. I want to show you how you can add a file type to the list of extra files that you want to be able to view in the Navigator. So I have a list of text file types that I have here, and I want to add, let's say I'm going to create a log for my application. I want to add that file type to this list so I can see what I have. So I do semicolon asterisk dot log, I hit enter, and it'll pop up any of those log files that I have available. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is stuff that's in the command window. I'm going to clear this out first of all. Here in the command window, I just want to show you a few things to see how it works. One thing we can do is when you do a question mark, that basically tells the command window that you want to see the results down here in the results pane. So I'm going to check the date function, and of course it returns a current date. Something else I can do is, let's say I want to use X as a variable and set that to this date. Let's say I want to see what type that variable is, and if I do question mark type X, I'll see that it's of type D, which is date. And there's another thing I want to show you are the properties, Navigator and the properties for the command window. If we go here in the command window and we go up to properties, we can see command window properties. There's just a few. You can change that output window to the left if you like, or to the right. And we're going to put that back up. You can also go up here in the Navigator and go to Properties, Navigator Properties. Really the only addition other than Show Extensions, which is the default, and I like to have that, save that there. You can also use this supplemental search path setting. If I choose OK, you'll see an Also Look In dialog come up. Now, if I want to be able to see any additional files other than the current directory that I'm working in, I can go ahead and go in here and find some other path where I want to look in there as well. So if I want to find something that has some more data, I'll go down here to Users. Okay, I'm going to go to my Samples folder. Here. And App Data, Local, drills down quite a bit, dBASE, Samples. Okay, so as soon as I do that, as you can see, it added all of those files that I have in that additional directory down here. But our current directory, and it's important to note, is still this top directory right here. So I'm going to take that out. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to create a database alias. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to close out of dBASE because whenever you edit the BDE alias in the BDE administrator, you need to be closed out of any files or any programs that use the BDE. So we'll go to our Start menu, go to All Programs, dBASE Plus, and BDE Administrator. This is the standard UAC dialog. We just say yes to run it. Okay, and in the BDE Administrator, I want to show you one thing here under the Configuration tab before I add a database. Just want to drill down here, go to the drivers, native, and if we go to the native dBASE driver, there's a setting here called a level setting for the dBASE driver. Let's say that you have some old dBASE DOS applications and you just bought dBASE Plus 2.8, and while you're learning how to use it, you want to be able to still use your old application. Well, in order to do that, but you want to use those tables that are in the old application in dBASE Plus as well, and you want to be able to make changes to it. Well, if you edit the table structure in dBASE Plus, it will save it to whatever the default level setting is. So let's say you have a dBASE DOS for 5, and you open that level 5 table in dBASE Plus, and then you make a change to it. You change a field value, or you do something to change the structure of the table, and then you save it. It's going to save it as level 7, and you will not be able to use those tables in your old DOS application. So if I click on this drop down here and I set the default level to 5, I can then go ahead and use it in either version, go back and forth, and it will only save that table as level 5. So I'm going to change this back here to 7. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our new database. So right click and then go to New, and we're just going to use the standard driver. And I'm going to call this database QAID. And under the default driver, you'll notice it says Paradox. I believe this is because way back when dBASE first started, Paradox was the default table. But we're going to set that to dBASE, and we're going to find the path to where I want to keep my files. So I'm going to go under C, my dBASE Plus Getting Started folder, and then Data, and then add it. And make sure to go off of this field to save that area, because it won't save it if you haven't moved off of it. So we'll close out of the BD Administrator. We're going to save all the settings, and it's going to warn you, all BDE applications, if you happen to have them running, it's going to warn you that they must be restarted for the changes to take effect. You say OK, and then we're going to go back in and we're going to open up dBASE, and we're going to create a table. So dBASE Plus. Okay, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to the Tables tab in the Navigator. We're going to go to the QAID database that we just set up, and I'm going to start creating a new table. Now, I just want to show you quickly this wizard. There are some predefined tables. They go from anything like an artwork collection to contacts information, customer information, to-do events, etc. But I really don't see anything that relates to what I want to do. So I'm going to cancel out of that, and I'm just going to go ahead and go right into the designer. Okay, to start to add a table, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to start creating my engineer table. So let's say the first thing I want is an engineer number, and I want that to be an auto increment number. I want it to be unique for every row, and I want, as you do your data entry, I want it to be determined automatically by dBASE what that number is. So I also want a first name. I'll leave that as width of 10, that's plenty, and last name, and I want to widen that out a little bit. And for my engineers table, that's pretty much all I'm going to want. But I want to add an index here. I want to be able to sort this table by last name. So I'm going to go over here and add an ascending index. And that's pretty much it for that simple table. Now I've already created it, so I'm not going to save this one. But I'm going to show you in my QAID table, which is the second table I wanted to create. We'll go into design mode. And here we'll see a QAID number, again an auto increment number, and I created an ascending index on it. We'll see engineer number, which is going to be linked to the engineer table. Level of importance, I've decided I'm going to have a level of importance from like 1 to 3. So 1 being the most important and 3 being the least important. So we only need a width. It's going to be a numeric value, and we only need a width of 1 for that. The next, I want an open field, which basically tells me whether or not this issue is still open or if it's closed. So we're going to use that as a logical value. Then I'm going to have a summary of what the issue is, and it's just going to be a regular character type. And a width of about 95 characters sounds good for a good description or a good summary. And if there are any details, such as an example of the program, some bit of code, or just a long-winded explanation, we can put that in a memo field, which basically is pretty much just limited by the amount of memory that you have available. Just a quick look at some of the other fields that are available. There's date field, float, OLE, binary, long, timestamp, double. Lot of field choices. Now I have my basic ascending indexes here. The next thing I want to do is I want to go up here and I want to create more of a complex index. So, whoops, that's desktop properties. I want to go up here to the structure menu item, and I want to go to Manage Indexes, and I want to add an index where I'm not only sorting by engineer number, but then I want to do a subsort by the importance. So it'll be by engineer number, and then any of the issues for them that are go from 1 to 3 in importance. So I'll go ahead and click New, and we're going to add engineer number and importance. And we're going to call this engineer importance. And we'll say OK. So it basically concatenates those two options in the index so that when I sort on that, it'll correctly sort out those rows. So I'll close out of there. OK, and I want to save my changes. The next thing I'm going to show you is the Query Designer. So we try to start it up here. I get unable to start SQL Query Designer. To run SQL Query Designer, restart dBASE as administrator. Now, because of the strict controls that UAC, or user account controls, has over certain registries, directories, and files, the SQL Designer will only work if dBASE Plus is running with administrator privileges. Even though you may be logged into your operating system account as an administrator, the default action for the executables is to run in more of a user account state. So if we close out of dBASE, I can show you how to start it up in admin mode. There's several ways to do it, but here's one quick way. Go to our All Programs, dBASE Plus. If we right-click on the shortcut and then choose Run as Administrator, and we get our dialog. Now once it runs up here, all we have to do is, after it's finished, we just double click to start the SQL Designer, and we can go ahead and start designing it. Okay, so the thing I'm going to do is, first we have to add our tables. I'm going to be using both the QAID and the engineer table. Next, we're going to create a parent-child relationship on the tables. The relationship I want to set is on the engineer number, and I want the QAID to be my parent. So I'm going to click and drag from engineer to engineer on the child table, and we've just created a parent-child relationship. Then we have to decide what fields we want to use in the final results of the query. So I'm going to first choose everything, but I want to take out the engineer number, and I also want to take out this open, because what I'm going to do for this query is I'm going to filter it based on whether or not open is true. So I already know what that value is. I don't need to add it to the query. And I'm also going to take out the detail part. Okay, the other thing I want to do is I want to add, I don't need the engineer number, I want to include the first and last name of the engineer. Next, we're going to filter our data based on the open field of the QAID table. So down here in criteria, we're going to go to QAID open. And since I know this is a logical field, we're going to say open equal to true. And you have to enter or that setting won't be saved. Okay. Now if I go to save the query, because that's all I'm going to do right now pretty much, and I want to save it as, let's see, QAID open. Okay, now I want to show you something kind of interesting here. If you right-click on that SQL file and you open it in the source editor, you'll see here that you can actually see the SQL statement that was created using the SQL Designer. This is really helpful, especially if you want to be able to write SQL statements in your source code rather than using a SQL file. This will kind of teach you how to do that. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is the data module. So we'll double click and we'll just go right into the designer. And this is dQuery, which is also our data module designer. First, what we want to do is we want to add QAID and engineer tables, but we need the database, so we'll double click. This is a list of our databases and tables, so we'll double click QAID to add the database. Then we want to add our engineer and QAID tables. Okay, after we add that, we're going to create a parent-child relationship in here as well. But this time, instead of QAID being the parent, I want to use engineers as the parent so I can do some filtering and reporting on the fly based on which engineer it's assigned to, the issue is assigned to. So click and drag from engineer number down to QAID2. Now what this brings up is our parent-child wizard dialog. You can either use an indexed or non-indexed link. I'm going to choose an indexed link because it's generally more a stable option. You can certainly do non-indexed links, but as long as I already have an index set up on this table, I'm going to go ahead and use an indexed link. And we're going to do that on engineer number. Okay, now I just kind of want to quickly show you some of the wizards available in dQuery. If you go up here in the upper left-hand portion, there's a wizard for creating a database connection. There's wizards for creating a table, importing data, exporting data, setting up parent-child relationship, filtering your data using star filter, filtering your data using manual filters, creating multi-table view for your data, searching for one specific record, printing, creating a Windows application, and web applications. Now I don't know if you're noticing a pattern here, but there are a lot of redundant systems for accomplishing any task. Filtering, sorting, grouping, and on and on. The answer to what designer to use, what option to use, really depends on what is more efficient for the application or for you, and more importantly, what you're comfortable with. So as you begin to play around with each of these designers, you'll start to learn what's more right for you. Now I'm going to show you a few of the features that I often use in dQuery. If we go down here to the single table, we can look at the parent table, and if I'm highlighted on this option, I can just click on the child table and only see those options that are related to the parent row set. And if we go over here to multi-table view, let's say I just want specific fields to see. So let's say I just want to see the first name and last name of the engineer. And the next thing I want to do is I want to see how important that issue is and whether or not it's open or closed. And then I just want a quick summary. this will automatically give you kind of a predefined query or table, even though it's not actually a physical table, but it's a way of querying the data and getting exactly what you need. So if we go over here to the report view allows us to see on-the-fly reports. As you can see here, if we go over the Reports tab, we have the report that we can print by using the print option, or we can make formatting changes to the report by using the Format button. You can change, I want to use landscape here because I want more information on the row. I want to use color shading, and maybe I want to add a title that says issues, and we're going to go ahead and preview that. And so what it did is it widened it out for me. It gave me some shading, and I like the look of that much better. So we're going to close out of this so we can format that more, or we can print it and pretty much do anything we want to with it. Another feature that I find really useful is the Export Data Wizard. I'm going to use the Export Wizard to export my multi-table view information to an Excel spreadsheet. So if we go up here to the wizards and we choose Export Data, we can choose to do it from the current query, from another query, or from the multi-table view, which is what I'm going to use. So we'll go next, and yes, I want an MS Excel spreadsheet. Next, and I got to choose where I want that spreadsheet, and we're going to call it Issues by Engineer. And we're going to say Save, and we'll go Next. And yes, I do want to open the spreadsheet when the export is complete, so we'll export it, and it's successfully exported. And if we go down here to Excel, we'll see that it automatically pops up our Excel spreadsheet with all that information from the multi-table view. So I'm going to close out of there. And next I want to show you how to create a report. We're going to save that data module. I'm going to save that as Issues. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go into the Report tab here, and I'm going to start a new report, and I'm going to go ahead and use the wizard this time. Now, I don't want to use raw tables. What I want to use is that SQL file that we created earlier. So I'm going to go to the directory, and that QAID Open SQL is what I want to use for the report. So we'll go Next, and we want detail rows. We don't want just summaries. And I want to go ahead and add all of this information. Actually, you know what? I've decided I want to create a group based on the last name. So I'm not going to include that name information for now. So I'm going to go Next. And yes, I do. I want to create a group based on the last name. So it'll group together by engineer all of the issues. And I want it in ascending order. So we'll go Next, and I want to do, this is where you can choose to do summaries on groups, as well as a grand summary for the entire report. So I'm going to go ahead and do a summary for the group, and what I'm going to do is do a count of the number of QAID numbers there are. In other words, how many issues are assigned to that particular engineer. And I also want a grand summary of how many issues there are in total. So we'll go ahead and go Next. And I want it in tabular format. We'll go ahead and add a page number. Want it in landscape mode. And we'll go Next. And let's just run the report to see what we have and see what changes we want to make. So I'm going to call this Issues by Engineer. And here we go. Okay, so we have our last name, we have our list of QAID numbers, we have the importance, how important it is, and we have our summary. Now, I want to move these around a little bit. I don't like how the summary is squished, and I also want to add the first name over here. I don't want just the last name. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in design mode, and we're going to highlight these two text objects and just kind of squinch them over a little bit. And we'll grab this and move this over as well and move it up a little bit. And I want to scrunch that into. And I'm going to grab my summary and this, and I'm going to move it over. And we're going to widen that out a little bit. Okay, and I want to move this back up. Things got kind of moved funky. Right now, what I have, I want to show you under the Properties, Report Designer Properties. Right now, if we click Snap to Grid and we try to move these components by clicking on them and using the arrows, it's going to go ahead and go point by point on this grid in the background. But I want a little more refined movement, so I'm going to go here to Report Designer Properties, and I'm going to undo that Snap to Grid. So we'll say OK. I want to move this up here and over there. Another thing you can do is we can do this in the inspector. I want to see what that top setting is. Scroll down here and go to the top setting, and it's 0. So I want it to be the same for these two. I want them to all line up. Go down here, and if we highlight both of those fields, we can set it for both of them in the inspector. Okay, and these I'm just going to move up, whoops, like that. And this one, just using my arrows here, there we go, up, back. There, I'm happier with that. The next thing I want to do is I want to add the first name to this field here. So if we go over to the inspector and we click on its text object, or the text property, and we click on the wrench, it'll bring up our code block section where we can modify this. Now in the code block, the first thing I see here is that long bit of code referencing the last name field. Now I want to give you a quick explanation of how to view that information. If we take a look at this here, it says this.parent.parent.parent.rowset.fields, and then the last name field. Well, what the heck does that mean? I mean, the this represents the object that you're currently highlighted on, or the text2 object here in the inspector. Its parent is the header band, its parent is the group, and its parent is the stream source 1 object. So if we go back up into here, we'll cancel out of that. If we go back up into here and we find that stream source 1 object, we can see here that it does indeed have a row set property, and it is linked to the QAID open row set. So we know we can reference that. Okay, I'm going to go back here to the last name and down to the text, and I'm going to show you how to change that. Now instead of rewriting this all by hand, I'm just going to copy this bit and do a Control-C. Now you'll see it says quote H3 and quote plus blah 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 blah. It's basically, you can add HTML tags as well. You can use pretty much just about any HTML tag that has to do with formatting. And then plus this just concatenates the different text areas, the different characters. So if we go in here and we do this bit of this string here plus, and then we copy, it says last name again, but what we really want is the first name. Okay, and then plus the last name. But we don't want them butted right up against each other. We want to go ahead and add a space and then add that together. So we'll say OK, and OK, that looks all right, but there's some extra spaces here. I don't really want that. So I'm going to add a function to this first name property to trim off those extra spaces at the end. So I'm going to use the rtrim function and go to the end here. And I'm going to say OK, and that way it'll trim off any extra spaces. Well, I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to go ahead here and run the report, and there we have our completed report. We have summaries for each of the engineers on how many QAIDs they have open. We also have a grand summary for the total number of issues that are open. So we'll close out of that. And the next thing I want to do is we want to move on to the forms, to the data entry form. So if we go over here and we right-click and we go to New Form, and we're going to go ahead and use the wizard. And I want to use that QAID table. So we'll do the QAID database and QAID data dBF. We're going to go ahead and add all the fields. And I'm going to go next. And I want to go ahead and, keep this in form layout. If you have a lot of fields that won't quite fit on your form, you have the option of having it pop up with some tabs, or if it just to use a scroll bar. So I'm going to leave it at scroll bar. And we'll go next. And here's the area where you can set the look and feel of the entire form. So if we go here and we can set some predefined schemes, we can do dBASE plus default scheme, we can do some other scheme, but I'm going to go back to dBASE plus default, and I want to change also in the sample area here. If you click on this area, let's say I click on a push button, it'll take you right to the push button settings. If I click on this entry field, it takes you to editing component settings. So I'm going to click up here on the title, and I'm just going to make that into like a dark red color. And we'll go next, and we'll go ahead and run the form and see what it is we have to work with. And we'll save this as data entry. Okay, so there's our quick form. Not real happy with it. I want to make some changes. I want to widen out this detail area, and I want to move some things around. So in the toolbar, I'm just going to use this design form toggle button, and we're going to go right into here and widen that out. Okay, and I want to take this and widen that detail out so I can see as much as possible. And I want to move that up here. And I want to move the summary up over here. And I like that much better. One of the things we can do here is we can format some of these. I want to show you some of the format options. If we click on this text object here, this title text option, first I want the component itself, and I want to go to Layout, Align, and I want to center it horizontally in the window. Then I want to widen it out, and I want to change the title. So I want to say, instead of QAID, I want to say data entry. Now let's see, I also want to make sure to center this text from inside the component. So if you double click so that you're editing the text, and then you go to Format, Align, Center, it'll align actually that text in the center of that component as well. Okay, now we didn't actually use the field palette, but I want to show you quickly how it works. If I wanted to, let's say I didn't have all the fields available, and I wanted to add another field, we just go down here to the field palette, and if it's not open, you can just right-click on your form, go to field palette, and we can just click and drag any of these fields, summary, detail, importance, we've already got them there, but I'll just click and drag one. And you'll notice that not only does it put one object, but actually two. It adds a title, and it also adds the entry object that you're going to use. So instead of clicking and dragging an individual component palette, it'll actually add both of those and do the data linking for you. So we'll delete out of there, and now I'm going to show you how to use the component palette. Let's say that during data entry, they can enter the engineer number, but how do they know who it belongs to? Well, I decided I'm going to go ahead and add a grid that will actually show the list of engineers and what their names are and what engineer number they belong to. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there, but I'm going to need my engineer table. So I'm going to go to the Tables tab, just click and drag my engineer dBF, bring it over, and I already have that query all set up under the form. Then all I have to do is go over here and click on the grid, scroll on down and find the data under data linkage, find the data link property, and link it to the engineer list. Okay, so that's pretty much it for now with the form. I'm kind of happy with that. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to save that, and we're going to go on and we're going to create a menu for the form, our own custom menu. Now, if we go here under the Forms tab, and here's our menu icon, we can right-click and go New Menu. Okay, I want to add some menu options here. The menu options I want to add are, I want to have a File menu option where you can close the form. Maybe I want to have after that I want to have an Edit option where you can add and save. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is maybe I want to have a Navigator menu, and I want to call it Go, and we'll say First, Last, Next, and Previous. Okay, so that's all I want to use for now. So now what I have to do is I actually have to add some code for these menu options. So if I go to File, Close, I'll go over here to the Events tab, and I need to decide, when does this actually get kicked off? Well, we need to use the on-click event so that when the user clicks on the close, something's going to happen. So we'll go ahead and click here on the wrench, and I'm going to add my code form.close, and the close method of the form is being used within that event. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to Edit, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say form.rowset.begin begin append to start a new row. Now, how do I know that I can do form.rowset? Well, I want to show you quickly here. Whenever you create a new form, either in the designer or using the wizard, if we take a look at the form we already created and we go into the source editor, I'm going to scroll down here and show you that what gets streamed out automatically is a row set property of the form, and it's set to our QAID row set. So I know that I can put here form.rowset.beginAppend to use the row set's begin-append method. So the next thing I want to do is I want to save it, and I'm just going to go on through here and add the rest of the code. Rowset.save. And we'll go under here, and we'll do form.rowset.first, and for the last, form.rowset.last, and for the next, form.rowset.next, and for the previous, form.rowset.next, and we're going to do a -1 in the next. In this next method, you can basically, if you want to go forward one row, you just do next, open, close paren. You could do the next 5 rows, next 10 rows, and on and on. And to go backwards, you just use a negative value. So we'll close out of there. Okay, the next thing I want to show you how to do is a shortcut, and also show you how to set up your menu options to use Control plus character key sets. So first, for the Control plus character key set, we're going to go to the top menu here in the navigation, and go to Properties, and under Text, all I want to do is I want to add an ampersand in front of the character that I want to be able to use with the Control key. So for that one, we'll choose the G and go. Now I already have a file that I'm probably going to be using, so I'm going to put this ampersand in front of the I in first, and this one we'll put in last, and we'll do next, and previous. Back here. Okay, the next thing I want to show you how to do the keyboard shortcut key mapping. So I'm going to do that just for these next and previous options. So for next, I'm going to go over here to the inspector, and under shortcut, I'm going to click on this little wrench here, and it's going to pop up the shortcut property builder. Now we can use no modifier and use maybe one of the function keys, but they're used for so many other things I really don't want to override that. I like the idea of using the shift key and the left and right arrows. For the next, we're going to use the shift next arrow key. Right arrow key, pardon me. Right arrow. And for previous, I'm going to go ahead and do shift left arrow. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that menu. The only thing we have to do is close and save it, and then I'm going to quickly show you how to attach it to your form. So we'll close out of there, we'll say yes, and we're going to call that QAID.menu. So we'll close out of there, and we'll go into the form that we created earlier, right click, and we'll go into Design Form, and I want to actually attach that menu I just created to the form. So if we go over here to the Forms menu file property, and we click on the wrench, and we double click QAID menu, and that's it, it's attached. So if we can go up here, we could close and then double click to run it, but I want to show you another shortcut here. In the toolbar we have this little run form icon, so we'll go ahead and run our form, and if you go up here you'll notice we have our form new menu that we created. We can close. Whoops, I didn't attach it right. And here, okay, or I might not have created it. Go in here, and it looks like I don't have the same thing. Well, let's try our shift right arrow, shift left arrow to move around, which it'll let us do. We can go in here and go to first, we can go to last, we can start to edit it, and we can do pretty much anything we want to do. So we'll close out of there. And that's pretty much it for the demonstration. Like I said, we're going to hopefully do more and more of these and get deeper and deeper into how you use dBASE Plus. So I just want to close out of here, and we're going to take your questions and try to answer them. But first, I just want to give you some contact information in case you want to send us any questions or suggestions. You can send them to techsupport@dbasellc.com, wishlist, customer service, or sales. Okay.